Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Abbie Richie. I'm the CEO and founder of Senior Savvy, and you can find me right here every Tuesday talking with people who are engaged in age tech innovation and how it relates to senior living. It's a great place to be, and I'm so excited to have our guests with us today. Before we run our intro, I want to go ahead and thank our sponsor, ProCare HR. Let's face it, HR tasks can be a pain in the neck. I know it. That's why ProCare HR is committed to helping you work out those kinks. You can focus on what really matters, delivering care. Ensuring that you can provide the highest level of care is their top priority. ProCare HR has proven results in helping care organizations because they only serve the care industry. ProCare HR addresses the common burdens like workforce shortages, wage gaps, expensive sign-on bonuses, legislative changes, high workers' claims, and more. Reach out to them today at procarehr.com. And with that, let's run our intro. Welcome back to Tech Tuesday. I want to go ahead and bring our guests on today. We have Aaron with Trestle Hospitality. Welcome back to Tech Tuesday. It's been almost a year.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Abby. I appreciate it. This is exciting.
Yeah. My pleasure. So we haven't talked about innovations in dining tech in quite a while. And while I've had people on to talk about robotics and different things like that, I want to hear from you. And before we launch into a discussion about dining technology and the innovations, I want to know from you, Aaron, why did you ever get into this particular niche?
Yeah, I think when I talk to a lot of people in the industry, our stories tend to be the same. My whole entire career, my whole entire goal was to be in hospitality. It was actually my goal was to be a hotel general manager, right, and run really high end hotels. But I just through life circumstance and the up and downs of the economy, as we've all experienced over our lifetimes, got into senior living just kind of on a whim and realized that all of the things that I wanted to do working in hotels, there was a bigger opportunity to make a better impact doing it in senior living. Especially because when I started, there wasn't a lot of really forward thinking, hospitality minded operators. And so it was the perfect, like kind of perfect storm, if you will, timing wise, to get in and start really driving that concept of hospitality and senior living.
Excellent, excellent. So how long have you been doing this for? How many years?
So I've been in the senior living space actually 11 days over 20 years. My 20-year anniversary was on the 10th of November. So I've been doing it for quite some time. But most recently, in the last 2 years, I started my company, Trestle Hospitality Concepts, with the goal of trying to help smaller regional operators really kind of add that extra level of hospitality and elevate their overall community experience so that way they can stay competitive with a lot of the larger operators.
So, in your time of working within hospitality, what is the model of the past like? If we're gonna talk about the model of the future, let's talk about the model of the past. What does that and what has that looked like to you?
Yeah, when I first started, it was a little bit of a shock to my system to see how senior living was operated. I went into a large CCRC community, and it was primarily independent living. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh well, we're going to have restaurants and cafes, and these people, I mean, they're basically just in an apartment versus living in their homes. And so, but when I got in and really started getting an understanding, it was all very institutional throughout all levels because it was being driven from the healthcare side of things and from that healthcare model. And so it was, very institutional, right? So in kitchens, we were doing a lot of batch cooking. Imagine big pieces of equipment where you could feed hundreds of people off of it. You know, menus and ticketing systems in the dining rooms and restaurants. They weren't even called restaurants then, I should say, but they were all very manual, very paper. The idea of using a spreadsheet to track like residents and meals and things of that nature was pretty innovative at the time. So, um, it was just about, again, the healthcare was driving the model. So we were trying to think, how can we feed residents as fast as possible, as quickly as possible? Let's make sure that we kind of check all the nutritional boxes and we take care of them in that way. And it really was not about what's my experience when I sit down. Is it tied into the overall experience of the community? So it was very, very kind of healthcare driven institutional model oriented.
Gotcha. Well, I come into senior living I've been doing this for about 5 years, and I've seen, experienced something very different. And so, how much has things changed in the past 5 years or so?
Yeah, it's been, pretty dramatic, I think, and for me, kind of great to see, right? I would say probably maybe, 8 or 10 years ago, people really started talking about they were using the terms restaurant style, right? And initially, it was a kind of a marketing, terminology. It was like, "Well, we're gonna do restaurant style," which means we're not gonna change how we do things, but we're gonna put servers in ties and aprons, and we're going to make the service feel like you're at a restaurant. You're gonna have choices, and so, um, but what's happened over the last few years is that people have started to see that, well, not only is the restaurant model really good from a marketing perspective, but from being able to meet resident needs and requests, being able to better manage food costs and labor expenses. All of those things have really started to drive some of the more forward thinking operators into an actual true restaurant model of service and how they operate, as opposed to that restaurant style, which is more of the kind of we're going to put bells and whistles on the old way of doing things.
Yes, yes. So it seems like in the past couple of years, a lot of things have innovated. Tell us about what happened during COVID, though.
Yeah. I think COVID was, the silver lining to COVID was, especially when you look at like food service and that community experience, was it forced us to figure out how do we use technology and innovative ways to deliver what we're doing. It forced us to really reevaluate our menus, kind of a little bit of a back to basics of, all right, what we're doing doesn't work, right? We need to be more flexible, and um, everybody kind of, staying in their apartments and all the separation, that kind of changed some habits for residents and guests as well. And so we've had to, fortunately, kind of adjust and adopt some of these technologies and these practices that are really, helping to innovate what we're doing. Another thing that I think, that really it kind of shone a light on was some of our ongoing problems that we were starting to see. It really kind of forced them to the forefront. Labor is probably one of the most pressing. We've we had a number of issues coming out of COVID. We worried about supply chain and food and products that we couldn't get, but a lot of that has kind of rectified itself. Even inflation, just this last month we were at 0% inflation. So kind of those market factors have all kind of improved, but labor is still an issue that we have to address. And so, some of the statistics that kind of, I guess, are worrying for someone like me who thinks about how can I help operators be better. 85% turnover rate in senior living as of last year. I mean, that's a huge number, right? So we're constantly new people and training and getting them up to standards, especially when you think about trying to offer that higher level of a restaurant model service. Um, as of March of this year, 70% of assisted living operators were reporting severe shortages of workers. So they're wanting to elevate those experiences, but they don't have the people to do it, right? And so you've got this perfect storm. And I think the last one when it comes to kind of the labor and the demographics is by 2030, there are 9.3 million jobs are going to need to be filled just in direct care. And when you think about how does that, translate to the food service and the ancillary uh, components, well, we've got probably about 10 or 15% of that workforce is in the food service side of things. And so you're thinking, well, we're going to need 1 to 1.5 million jobs filled in addition to where we're at currently, just in like food and hospitality jobs and senior living. So we've got to start thinking, how do we elevate the experience, but also handle this staffing shortage. And I think that's where we really start looking at what kind of tech and how do we integrate tech into the overall experience for residents.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's discuss what are some solutions to the workforce shortage.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that when you're thinking about implementing tech, right? I think the biggest need is going to be to solve for labor. But how do you
Mhm.
do it in a way that's going to, again, think about the variety of choices that our residents are going to start demanding as demographics change, and we're wanting to elevate the resident engagement experience. And so, the idea that tech needs to be it needs to be high tech, but it also needs to be high touch, right? And the idea there is that whatever technology you're thinking about using, you're thinking about implementing, the goal shouldn't be to how do I replace this staff person? How do I
Right.
lower my cost on labor? It should be more about how do I not replace the human experience, but rather how do I enhance it, right? And so as we look at some of these different technologies, it's important to think in that mindset of it's not just an activity like I described, in that institutional model of years ago, but food service is going to become just it needs to be integrated into the overall community experience. And the way technology supports that is going to be really important.
What have you seen out there that fits that type of explanation or bill?
Yeah. So, I recently had some conversations and we did a webinar about this where um, we created what we called the community of the future, right? And um, being someone that has a food service background, I really was interested in those pieces. But knowing that we're evolving into, it's more about the experience overall. How does food and hospitality come together for that resident? And so what we did was we kind of created this community of the future. And what does that look like for a resident, right? And what I'd love to do is kind of walk you through what that can look like if you were to
Mhm.
really embrace this concept of high tech and high touch, and really look at how do we take the the labor that we're going to have available to us and really enhance them to be more resident forward. And so, um,
Yeah, let's hear
yeah,
it.
yeah, so imagine we're gonna follow, we're gonna call her Mrs. Jones, right? And so Mrs. Jones, a day in the life in this community of the future, it's really, kind of forward thinking, she's, a late riser, she likes to have breakfast in her apartment, and so, instead of coming down to the dining room, she's getting her breakfast delivered to her room. Now in the past, that would take a staff person to take each meal to each apartment. But now, we've got a delivery robot that's taking the meal to her apartment. And so, she gets her
And how
meal while she's doing that. Yeah.
how is she ordering it?
So, most likely she's using some sort of mobile device or she's using the resident engagement software on her in-room television, right? Because if you're connected with all of your different softwares and all of the different applications in your community, this is going to allow her some freedom to be able to say, well, I know I want this, and she can place her order the night before. She can wake up and just place it then. It allows her that flexibility to kind of drive her own schedule, but it doesn't
Mhm.
impede the staff from having to, how do I call her? Do I go to her room? Like, again, it lets her kind of control it with the high tech piece. And then the high touch comes later in the day when she's up and active inside the community. And so
And when you
one of the other
envision,
things that I think is really great, a great opportunity in that scenario is um, wearable tech, right? We all have our Apple Watch or our Fitbit or whatever device you may be using, that's checking on all of our vitals and our health, right? Well, with the right systems in place, you know, now while you're getting your meal delivered, all of your vitals are being communicated to a nurse on call or to the nursing station, right? So now instead of having someone running the halls trying to just take temperatures or check blood pressures or whatever, they can be focused on those more engaging tasks, like maybe they're delivering medications or maybe they're helping with transfers or whatever it might be, right? So we're taking those human experiences where they're needed, and we're not pushing them into the mundane tasks, if you will, that technology can help us support. And so,
like
um,
like deliverance, right?
yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of opportunity there with that meal delivery to be able to do multiple tasks and different things that are really great. And um, so um, the next step in Mrs. Jones's day is that she's scheduled for an activity, and we've seen all of the various different VR experiences, and so there are software and operators out there that are doing great things like virtual tours across the globe, right?
Mhm.
And so when you think about how does food play into something like that, well, we want to have the full experience, right? It's not just let's put on the headset and let's watch a video, right? We're talking to a live tour guide who's walking us through Venice or Paris or Beijing or wherever. And then the kitchen at the same time is preparing that snack or that recipe that ties into that, right? So again, we've got some technology that's giving us an experience, but we're elevating that human touch with the food offerings and it not just being maybe a tray of cookies and coffee, but now we're having a bigger experience around uh, that VR experience when it could be something basic. Now we've elevated it more.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for taking us through the day in the life of the future resident. I appreciate that. It was very visual and imaginary. So, the thing I want to ask you, in addition to labor shortages, what else is challenging in regards to hospitality and dining?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that, that inflation this last month was at 0. Well, the flip side of that is that just because inflation is at 0 doesn't mean we haven't experienced massive increases in cost of goods, right? At one point in the last 12, 15 months or so, we were looking at 12, 13, 14% inflation when it came to food costs. And so um, looking at how we can be more focused on um, automating our kitchens, automating our back of the house,
Mhm.
really is important. We talked a little bit about having the mobile ordering offering for the resident in their room, right? Well, using a properly integrated point of sale system will not only allow us to, get those orders from the resident, but it's gonna help us let our staff stay on those restaurant dining and cafe floors and being more engaged with residents, while at the same time helping the kitchen in the back of the house be able to better do more of that a la minute style of cooking, which is gonna help us with food costs and help us with production, not just from cost standpoint, but from an inventory management standpoint, and also from a quality of product standpoint. It's going to be really key, I think, going forward that we let the staff become more specialized in what they do, right? We want our cooks in the kitchen to be really good at creating dishes and want our staff on the floor not to just be, food runners, right? We want them to be customer service agents, if you will. We're engaging with residents. They're not just part of the meal experience, but they're part of that overall community experience, like I said. And, they're engaging in the residents, which that higher human touch piece lets us get more background. Maybe we can find out, well, maybe there is some issues or something going on with this resident where they need more support, more care, more something. And now, maybe we're struggling with care staff on the floor, but now we're using other employees and other people and other touch points to help us really take better care of the residents in a more holistic way.
Let me ask you something because on the show we talk about technology and like last week, for instance, we talked about Wi-Fi and how there's so many communities that are still not up to speed. When you're looking at the dining and the hospitality picture
Mm.
here, how many communities, just percentage wise, are like still in the past, and how many have taken the leap forward?
It's hard to say. I think the biggest thing I find, it's funny that you mentioned Wi-Fi, right? Because when it comes to integrating technology, that is probably one of the bigger challenges that I find with clients and communities I've been in the past few years is that they're very focused on, okay, well, we've got to have the ability to get that technology into a room or in the hallways so our med carts have the technology. But the kitchen and the dining room seem to get left behind, right? And again, it's back to, a lot of operators not looking at this forward thinking that food service is not an opportunity. It's more of an expense to be managed, right? There's opportunity when you're struggling with shrinking NOIs to kind of capitalize on what I call retailization of your food service operation, and it doesn't
Mhm.
happen unless you have the right technology and systems in place. And so, um, it's getting better, but I would say the biggest thing to look forward to is that with the way the markets have shifted to operators and investors um, looking to renovate and update communities as opposed to maybe doing new builds, I think we're gonna see a surge in how technology and some of these operators are gonna implement, even some of the basic things needed. So we'll see a lot of improvements, I think, over the next few years, as renovations come through on getting technology in place and being able to execute it better.
Yeah, and they may have no choice because of labor shortages, right? So they'll be
Absolutely.
driven to make some changes. Now, when you're looking at in your crystal ball of tech innovations, what would you say are some things you wish were already invented?
Oh, man, that's a tough one because, I think a lot of the tech we need in senior living is kind of already out there, right? We've got great point of sale systems. We've got great inventory management systems. I think the biggest thing is I want to see how operators and even food service in general is going to really look at how they can use AI to enhance what they're doing, right? We talked a little bit about that human element, right? That high touch kind of experience, and I think AI can assist with that when you think about mundane tasks as far as like answering phone calls and taking room service orders or planning events and things of that nature. Being able to see how that technology can be integrated, I think there's so many ways when you think about recipe development, when you think about looking at streamlining workflows and doing kitchen and dining development and design. I think AI is going to be a real game changer for all of that. And I know we're just getting into like AI image generators and things of that. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to really push the boundaries in food and hospitality in our space when it comes to something like artificial intelligence.
And if you are speaking to an operator, as many of our viewers are operators, and they could do one thing, what would you recommend that they focus on right now?
So I would say look at how your processes and your systems are. Like, what is your baseline? Do you have those in place? And then look at how you can implement the right technologies to streamline those. I work with operators that are still using like paper temperature logs when we have great systems that will monitor that for you.
Mhm.
That's just one example. But really take a hard, close look on what technologies will improve my processes, improve my procedures, and allow, again, the people that are doing the work in my community to be more impactful with how they engage with residents and the tasks that we know technology is not going to take over. Technology is not going to be able to replace a really great line cook or a really great chef and their creativity. And so those are the things we want those people doing. And let's figure out how we take some of those mundane, routine tasks off of them as they put things together.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, Aaron, is there anything else, any other piece to this puzzle that we haven't discussed so far that you'd like to share?
We didn't really get to talk much about like self-service, right? And I think that's one area that, as I think about opportunities to evolve what we do, we've been very focused. I think, and rightly so, because that's what our residents expected was they wanted the service, they wanted that kind of weighted experience. But um, as we kind of shift into a different demographic here in the next, 3 to 5 years, this self-service is something that can be beneficial. There's an operator who has communities in Pennsylvania actually that they have unmanned cafes and bistros. And one of the things they found is that it was more cost effective to use the technology in that way as opposed to put a staff person in there.
So
Do
what
you
does that
lose a
look like?
little? Say that
What does
again?
what does an unmanned cafe look like?
Yeah, so you have kind of your self-service kiosk, so imagine, like, going to the grocery store and self-service checkout, but all of the items are labeled, they're barcoded, residents have access and accounts set up in their point of sale to be able to check themselves out, and then you've got the use of, like, RFID, and security cameras, mostly to kinda track motion and activity, and to really kind of monitor and track the movement of the products in and out for like
Mhm.
inventory sake. And so there's operators out there now on the contract management side that have fully self-contained convenience stores that you can go into now in like hospitals and business and industry where that you walk in and you literally like scan your badge and it tracks
Mhm.
you and you can walk out and you don't even have to like check out. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to be there in the next couple of years in senior living, mostly from the demographics, but I could definitely see a technology like that really taking hold, maybe in the next, like I said, 3 to 5 years as those residents become more and more accustomed to that kind of technology in their everyday lives.
So we talked about the restaurants, we talked about some self-service. Is there any other area or any other area of, hospitality in serving people that we need to consider?
You know, I think you can think a little bit about the health and wellness aspect of food
Mhm.
service. I know I talked early on about how the institutional model I started in the industry with was really driven by healthcare. We need to keep that piece, and I think there's going to be opportunities where we can take advantage of kind of a telehealth model when it comes to nutrition and wellness and getting those consultations. There are robotics operators now that are actually partnering with dietitian organizations and doing virtual dietitian visits in communities with their systems. And there's a lot of things that can be done in a visit like that where you can just, it's really about talking about food. It's talking about what are your likes and dislikes? What are your issues and conditions and how can we address them? I think that there's an opportunity there to maybe take some of those telehealth models and look at how we do nutrition with not just our skilled nursing and assist living, but even in independent living where we're trying to be forward thinking about, well, how do we do healthy menus? How do we do implementation of things like mind diets and having education and training on that? It's not necessarily feasible to bring a dietitian in to your community, but they can absolutely kind of dial into a course or a conversation around healthy eating and healthy nutrition habits. And so there's definitely a lot of opportunity. And there's some people who are looking and working on that now in the space that I think has a lot of a really exciting opportunity, I think, as we go forward.
I agree. I agree. Well, Aaron, this has been so informative. Thank you. And when other people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, well, I would point everybody to go to my LinkedIn profile. That's going to probably be the best way. Connect with me. You can follow me, and there we can communicate, and you can kind of stay on top of all of what's going on. If you want to learn more about Trestle Hospitality, you can visit our website at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. And last but not least, I would encourage everybody, please go like, subscribe, and follow the podcast, Tips from Trestle. It is, we focus on food and hospitality and community experience in the senior living space. And so we try to keep that unique bent on what we present. And we have a lot of great speakers and guests on our show. And so I'd love for everybody to follow us there and be a part of the conversation.
Aaron, final question for you. Are you cooking this year?
So I typically do, but
Mhm.
I don't usually find out what my job is until I get to my in-laws' house. And so
Okay.
we are traveling there later today. So I would be shocked and surprised. We have 14 people in the house this year. So my guess is I'm going to get put to work.
All right. Good, good. Great to hear. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. And thank you to our sponsors, ProCare HR. And we will see you back here next week.